Hello and welcome to The Digital Insight, the technology, procurement and supply chain podcast that delivers valuable C-level perspective into the core issues surrounding business transformation and digital disruption. Each episode will bring you the most inspiring executive insights from those who are leading transformation strategies within the world's biggest and best-known companies. The Digital Insight. Disrupt, transform, evolve.
Welcome to the Digital Insight, the official podcast series for CPO Strategy and Interface magazines. Today we'll be speaking to Rod Robinson, VP Supplier, Inclusion and Sustainability at Coupa. Coupa is one of the fastest growing publicly listed technology companies in the world, and its procurement software is used by more than 1,300 of the world's most well-known companies, including Airbus, BMW and Adidas. Rod is responsible for overseeing the company's global supplier diversity efforts, with the primary focus of his role being to connect minority-owned businesses with larger businesses. Rod, welcome to the Digital Insight. So, Rod, thank you very much for agreeing to appear on the Digital Insight. Could we start with getting a little bit of a background to your role and your responsibilities at Coupa?
Sure. My role is Vice President of Supplier Inclusion and Sustainability. And that role, the focus of that role is really driving inclusive procurement across the Coupa ecosystem. So it's really more of a customer facing role focused around helping Coupa customers achieve and even exceed their supplier inclusion goals. And I joined Coupa from the acquisition of my company, Connexus, which was really a pioneer in the supplier diversity management software space. So very excited about the opportunity to continue the Connexus mission at Coupa.
Okay, and talking of which, obviously we're here today to talk about the Inclusion Initiative. How did that come about exactly? What was the sort of the genesis of that?
Well, sometimes they say timing is everything. Obviously, the Connexus acquisition happened in May of 2020. There was a lot of momentum around it as the market became aware that Coupa had acquired Connexus. Obviously, there was a lot of interest in supplier inclusion, both from, kind of a Coupa customer perspective. Obviously, Coupa customers were calling with great interest and, how can I access, these tools? Are they available in the Coupa platform now? And then soon after that, the George Floyd incident took place here in the States. And that sort of was a real tipping point for companies, already on the path of driving their supplier inclusion initiatives. But that was really, just a catalyst that fueled the flame even more. And so it sort of tied right into how we were looking at integration of the Connexus platform. So while we had plans to integrate the Connexus platform into Coupa, there were incidents and obviously demand from the market that caused us to accelerate that. And so that's really the driver of the inclusion initiative. We felt that while we're, sort of integrating the Connexus platform into Coupa, there's also an opportunity for us to really show how important procurement is and how we can provide tools and resources to make it easier for our customers to, to activate, to take action, but also at the same time help those minority, ethnic diverse companies grow and prosper. So that was really the catalyst. It was really, obviously some events drove the acceleration of it, but it's always been a top agenda item for Coupa customers.
And I was going to say, in terms of diversity within procurement, how would you kind of sort of how would you define that, if you like? Because obviously it's quite an easy sort of catch-all term in many respects, isn't it? So what exactly is diversity within procurement?
Well, diversity in procurement is really it's really more about inclusion of underrepresented suppliers in the supply chain. That can mean obviously, in some markets, like the U.S. and North America, it's more focused around ethnicity and gender. In the in markets in Europe, it's more driven around gender. Obviously in the UK, there's definitely a focus on ethnicity, from the standpoint of customers that we're working with. But it's really the underrepresentation of certain businesses, and typically smaller businesses, that are really responsible for driving jobs growth. And so, when you think about supplier diversity initiatives, small business procurement initiatives, it's really about driving economic impact. And it's really the small businesses that drive economic growth in any economy. So that's really the gist of it. It's really about, market stimulation and economic impact.
And I guess from what you're saying, really, we can infer that traditionally some companies would have been struggling to diversify their supply base.
Yeah, I think what happens is we typically fall back to our default. I used to be a chief procurement officer, and while companies tend to struggle and historically have struggled finding diverse suppliers, I knew diverse suppliers existed. The problem was finding them. So, typically, you'd have to go out and do manual searches, of different databases, depending on whether you were looking for women-owned businesses or ethnic minority-owned businesses. The other option was to pick up the phone and actually call a colleague, and that's not very efficient. And so typically, if you're in a pinch, what's the easiest thing to do? Well, the easiest thing is to fall back on the incumbent. And typically going with the incumbent, you're not really having an impact, right? Like they say, you typically, fall into your comfort zone, and even if given the option to hire the incumbent, which will drive no impact, but maybe identifying a new innovative supplier, you basically have a significant impact, because it's more likely that you're going to have a much greater impact in terms of innovation and potential for driving growth if you were to go with the take a chance on a smaller innovative supplier.
And also, I guess, sort of, we're used to the term or the role of the diversity chief as well, aren't we? And they've often sort of been cited as not being able to maybe deliver that kind of strategic value to companies.
Well, I wouldn't say. I would say what I've seen over time is diversity. Supplier diversity per se has typically been a bolt-on and really operating in a silo outside of procurement. And so having the supplier diversity, sort of leadership operate outside of procurement, there are missed opportunities. Typically the procurement decisions made, before they've had an opportunity to be involved in a process to sort of verify whether there is availability within a particular category. So I wouldn't say they don't add value to the process. I would just say that typically in what I've seen is that, typically supplier diversity is really sort of operating on an island unto itself, when it really should be an integral part of the procurement process.
I see. And in terms of the Coupa Inclusion Initiative, one obviously we're talking about diversity here. How do you actually go about embedding diversity into a platform like that?
Well, what I love about, what I really love about Connexus now being a part of Coupa is over the 10-year run of building Connexus, we've built this large database of, vetted diverse suppliers. But Connexus really enabled companies to focus on, sort of tracking and reporting spend. So we provided, sort of access to these companies that are certified and classified and provide all this, great insights relative to, their bona fides and their credentials. Coupa, a platform that, the premier business spend management platform, transacting nearly $2 trillion a year in spend. Now we can connect the spend with the supply. And so that's the difference, is like we're now positioned to help companies look forward versus just looking back at what they've done historically, but we can actually help connect those suppliers to the spend at a very large scale.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of, you've obviously worked with some big partners on this project as well. Talk to me about some of those.
So we, it's interesting, as a part of the inclusion initiative, there's an educational component, where we're providing tips, tools and resources to suppliers, because we realize that in order to help our customers achieve their supplier inclusion goals, we also have to make sure that we're making it easy and providing tips and resources and coaching to help build, create more scalable, diverse suppliers. And so we've embarked on this journey of providing webinars. We're producing webinars with partners and customers like Amazon, for example. We just had a webinar on, sharing with suppliers, how to go digital, right? How to take your business and sell via e-commerce, right? Leveraging Amazon. So as a part of that, we had a fireside chat with, a minority woman-owned e-commerce company that actually has been an Amazon bestseller, or is an Amazon bestseller, went from concept to best-selling product inside of 5 years. And, Amazon played a key part in that. And then also, she's now going to be selling on Coupa Open Buy. So taking her business from purely business to consumer to now looking at a business to business model where she'll be able to sell directly into large corporates, via Coupa Open Buy. So that's an example of how we're, sort of leveraging our customer and partner relationships, because we're all aligned around the same goal. We feel that when small businesses succeed, when diverse businesses succeed, we all succeed.
And what would you say have been sort of some of the challenges in creating an initiative of this type?
I think there's so much that can be done, that needs to be done. Small businesses, what we find is they need, I think for one, they need connections, right? They need the right connections. They want contracts because that helps to drive revenue growth. Their operational support needs that are required. And then there's capital needs. So it's like, where do you start? And so one of the things that's been refreshing is that we've formed an SMB advisory board to really help us prioritize these needs. But in the process, what we've discovered, like we've had a couple of great, I'm viewing it as a success story already, because we're actually been able to help, a supplier who is facing some very rapid growth, but we're in need of a fulfillment partner. And so we were able to provide a couple of options for fulfillment. And so now this particular supplier will now be able to remove a key barrier to growth and continue to accelerate their growth. So, so that was an example of, an operational support need that is a barrier between, this great, innovative, diverse supplier and, sort of getting to that next level of growth. And so so to answer your question, it's really prioritizing, the resources, and those are going to vary based on, the stage of, a company's growth. And so I think that's probably one of the challenges, is just making sure that we continue to capture the voice of the supplier and just making sure that we understand the needs.
And how would you kind of gauge the success of the initiative?
I would say it's great. We're finding that we are attracting the right individuals inside these small diverse businesses. We're finding that they're rating the content highly already and valuable. And they're also giving us great feedback on, what they'd like to see in the future and what issues they're facing, right? And one of the, some of the challenges that they see, post-COVID. So I think it's, so those are, that's been quite refreshing to see.
I mean, talking of the C word there, it's obviously been a strange year for every kind of enterprise. I mean, how do you think that's particularly impacted on procurement and certainly with regards to diversity within procurement?
Well, that's an interesting question. I think, obviously a number of businesses, particularly service businesses per se, where, restaurants, right, obviously have been, more hard hit than some of the other segments. So have certainly heard, some interesting challenges with businesses that have struggled, and some have recovered because of some of the some of the local programs and government, like the PPP loans were helpful in that regard. On the other hand, I'm seeing suppliers, these smaller businesses even thrive and, have become challenged because of the explosive growth they're seeing. And many of these companies are already, sort of selling online, right, or e-commerce driven, like the example of the company that I mentioned earlier. Because they are digital, they're starting to see more growth. And then, and what I've seen too is, like, for example, this one, supplier that we are working with, the concept, not to get into the details of the product, but it's head protection gear or hair protection gear called a hairbrella is the name of the product, designed for women to sort of protect their hair in the rain and not actually sort of mess it up, right? It keeps everything in place. But what Tracy found is, as we got into the pandemic, she started seeing different use cases pop up. So she's actually evolved the product. She's actually created some additional SKUs that have basically made it, basically PPE, protective headwear, with the shield, and now it's being used by medical professionals and service professionals and delivery and such. So COVID actually created an opportunity for growth, for some organizations. I'm seeing the same thing with another supplier that's focused more in the promotional products arena and uniforms, where they're being asked, because companies are now working from home. So his business has exploded, because now, instead of shipping, directly to their enterprise customers, they're having to ship, to employees' homes. So whereas you might have been shipping, your shipping volume may have been, sort of going from, Oakland to, let's just call it Indianapolis. Now you're sending it to 200 different locations, right? You're doing this kitting and such. So, so not getting into details, but basically you're seeing some of these COVID being a catalyst for accelerating the sort of digital, business plans of these companies. And I think to the extent they have the support they need, they'll be able to make that transition. And so that's what we're seeing now is, those who are, sort of well positioned to make that transition are thriving.
And in terms of Coupa's inclusion program, is that available in North America at the moment, or is that actually going global?
Yeah, so we started with a focus on North America, but we do have plans to roll out in additional markets. In fact, one of our SMB advisory board members is actually out of the UK, president of the MSD UK, which is the largest diverse, supplier diversity advocacy and certification organization in the UK, and so he's going to be very, very instrumental in helping us as we sort of expand globally.
And are you experiencing sort of demand from other territories?
Absolutely. Supplier diversity is, quite prevalent, obviously in the U.S., but other key markets are the UK, where there's definitely more focus on ethnicity, but in other parts of Europe, it's more driven by, when you think about identity, it's more gender focused, and then focus more on sort of the immigrant populations as sources of growth and economic stimulation. Australia is another market where Aboriginal. There's a focus on driving sourcing from Aboriginal suppliers. South Africa obviously is another market. I was just on a call this morning with some of our team members in South Africa because there's great interest in the initiative. Obviously, there's a lot of legislation driving Black economic empowerment in South Africa. So, while our initiative would look a little bit different, it's still around the same issue of, again, it's all about, equality and economic, justice and empowerment. And believe it or not, there's supplier diversity. There's supplier diversity efforts in China, right? There's the focus in China is more on gender and geography. So, and a lot of the sort of growth, development and knowledge around this was really customer driven for us. It's because we have customers that have great interest in visibility and tracking and spend reporting with various segments of their supplier networks. So yeah, we definitely plan to expand the effort.
Do you get interesting feedback from the sort of current clients?
Yeah, we do. We do get interesting feedback from current clients, and it's been great to, as we're continuing to innovate on the product, to get clients to be a part of that process, to provide us with feedback on not the product, and even be involved in the inclusion initiative. I don't know if you saw the release, but I think the American Red Cross was quoted in the article. Other customers in the airline industry have great interest and have sent us notes about, hey, have you thought about adding this? And hey, we'd love to be involved in providing a webinar on how to do business with the airline industry post-COVID. what things we're going to be buying, So yeah, we've been getting great feedback and even more interest in being a part of it. So that's been great.
I mean, obviously, procurement's gone through quite a kind of revolution almost, hasn't it, in the last sort of 4 or 5 years anyway. And then obviously with COVID and diversity and sustainability and factors like this, it really is quite an arena for change, isn't it?
Yeah, and I it's changing the role of procurement, right? I mean, I think it's really increasingly driving procurement professionals to a new place of real value-added business partner, strategic business partner. And one of the things that I'd like to see continue to happen, and I'm seeing it now, but I'd like to see this continue, is procurement, and particularly more of an integration between supplier diversity and procurement. I think we're seeing those silos come down now, particularly with Coupa customers, because the platform is built to eliminate those silos. But I think it puts procurement in a place where they're able to plan and really with the technology, there's not so much chasing data, because you have visibility, because you're able to track, because you're able to report. Now we can kind of look forward and really be a part of the planning process. And if we can do that, then we have an opportunity to kind of get a head start on, who are the right suppliers and, what sustainability metrics and requirements and, diversity requirements, what are our goals? It enables, procurement to spend more time on the strategy versus sort of blocking and tackling. So that's what I'm pleased about. Again, today's social climate has put a renewed spark in, in inclusive procurement. And, many companies, have great intentions, but it can be difficult. But what I'm really happy about is that, at Coupa, we're really, breaking down the silos and providing the technology and the tools to really make this sustainable.
Thank you for listening to the Digital Insight Podcast in association with the Interface.net and CPOstrategy.com. The Digital Insight is brought to you by B2E Media Limited. We hope you enjoyed this episode. Please remember to subscribe, rate and review. And don't forget to check out our podcast archive at www.b2e-media.com/The Digital Insight.